Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Modern Market. This is our daily show from Monday to Friday at 7 a.m. Eastern Time, 12 p.m. BST, every day of the week, where we discuss all things to do with the modern market. That is the crypto market, the NFT market, and the Bitcoin future price market, where we get to speculate on all of the above things and more. But just a reminder before we do that, that nothing that we say here is financial advice. This modern market is exceptionally risky. We don't know anything for sure, so please do proceed with caution and exercise your own judgment. I'm your host, Bchek. I'm joined by my legendary co-host, Legendary. Let's get into it. Getting into the market today. Legendary, how are you doing? It's Monday. It's the 3rd of June. Start of the summer, perhaps. We've sold in May. We've gone away. We've come back. How are you feeling?
GM, doing pretty well. I felt pretty bullish over the weekend. Might be the case that I had a call with Moritz talking degen things once again, including what is the minimum net worth to make a purchase of a 100K watch feasible and not an utterly ridiculous purchase in the grand scheme of things. So hence, I also went with the title today, BTC to 500K, because I'm feeling bullish. I'm feeling good this week.
Because if BTC goes to 500K, then you can buy a 100K watch. Is that the proportions we're looking at?
If BTC goes to 500K, I can buy a lot more things than just the watch, and I'd be pretty happy about that.
Okay.
But yeah, generally feeling quite bullish. Despite last week, I had posted on X and need to repost that a miserable loss on my end.
Oh,
I
yeah?
said if ETH doesn't hit 4K last week, I will stop farming Blast. And
Oh,
obviously it didn't. And obviously I'm not going to stop farming Blast, but I definitely have to quote post my own L call on that.
interesting. Yeah, that's a difficult one to take. You gotta, yeah. There would be nothing that gets in between you and Blast at the moment. I can probably say that with quite some confidence.
Yeah, 100% agree. Nothing stops me from farming Blast. And also, I feel more positive now. Like last 2 weeks, maybe I felt a bit exhausted, burnt out by farming Blast. But somehow now I feel like a fresh wave of energy looking forward to Blast Season 2 and keep the grind going.
That's pretty cool. I mean, that's definitely required. I have basically gone on an unofficial holiday from Blast, like official farming, for all the reasons we mentioned previously, like, opportunity costs, where the business is, how many gold I've already got, doing some little estimations on what I'm probably going to get. So that's on the Blast side. One other reflection on the other thing you said, which is when people start doing estimates of like, I don't know, is thinking when you can buy a 100K watch the same as when people start browsing Zillow or whatever other property websites they have in their country to try to figure out what house you can buy when Bitcoin gets to whatever particular price? Is this the maybe more youthful version of the same thing?
It's the different version of that. You know that
Yeah,
I
you hate
don't
the
have
house.
any inclination to buy real estate. I just don't want to own real estate. It doesn't really fit my lifestyle. And a watch is much easier to liquidate and carry around and then liquidate. But it would be obviously a very good analogy.
Yeah, people don't know. The reason why I wasn't here on Friday's show was because I was in court, not for anything particularly serious, but it was to do with property. And one of the things that you will realize when you have some exposure to property, and Legendary's argument makes more and more sense now, is that when it's going well and all the prices going up all the time, maybe if you own the thing in kind of in its entirety, everything's great. Things are wonderful. On the other hand, if you have bad tenants and they stop paying you and you have to go through like a court process to start doing that stuff, you will very quickly realize that you think you own the property, but you don't really own the property. Um, the way the laws have developed, at least in the UK, but my understanding is in other places too, is that it's getting increasingly difficult to kind of exercise your property rights. Um, and that is a challenge. And that is a challenge that you don't necessarily face with Bitcoin or ETH or any other other kind of crypto commodity. So whilst I do think property is like an exceptionally useful asset, and maybe if you own it outright, it might be a bit better. But if you have any kind of payments to make at the same time, whilst you can simultaneously have tenants who just refuse to pay and then are not on the hook for paying you back, that becomes like a bit of a more challenging asset. Legendary, I don't know if you have any reflections on that.
Yeah, I mean, adding maybe from my perspective, in Austria, it's a very specific situation where it is a very regulated market, especially in Vienna. We have something that's called the MRG, the Mietrechtsgesetz, which stipulates, beautiful long German word again, how much rent you can charge people in basically older buildings that have been built before the Second World War, which is basically almost all of Vienna because we have century-old buildings in there.
Yeah.
And then you also have contracts that go back to the time when Austria used to be a monarchy, and that contract you can inherit to your kids, your grandkids, etc. So you could end up buying a house somewhere in the first district. You cannot charge market prices, and then you have 3 tenants in there who maybe pay €100, €150 max per month because they have that century-old contract that they can pass down to the kids, and there's like absolutely no way to get rid of them. So Austria might be an exception, or Vienna specifically, because it's a super regulated real estate market that just doesn't make it very attractive to buy, but more attractive to rent, unless you're going like for commercial buildings and stuff.
Yeah, one of the things I've been thinking recently is the more lucrative an asset class becomes, this is with no particular historical knowledge, just kind of thinking out loud, the more lucrative a particular asset class becomes, the more regulation it will attract over time. And I guess real estate wasn't necessarily, of course, owning land, owning real estate has probably always been a profitable endeavor, but it's only been probably in the last, I don't know, 50, 60, 70 years post-war where it became, at least in London, I can't speak for worldwide data, but it just became this absolute money printer where you'd experience outrageous gains within a few decades. And historically, that was probably not the case. And so I wonder whether, in the same way that attracts all kinds of regulation as a consequence, then the future very profitable asset classes like crypto will get increasingly regulated, which on some level will be good because we have an absence of regulation at the moment, but maybe increasingly kind of just have some additional oversight. Any thoughts on that, Legendary, before we get into the headlines for today?
Yeah, I think that's a very good train of thought to say if asset classes become more popular, more profitable, then obviously, as we see that in crypto, they start to attract the regulators' attention.
Okay. Nice little random way to start today, musing on different asset classes, but let's get into all of the headlines as usual. As always, we get the headlines and price action from the snapshot, which is pinned up top. If you do find it brings you some value today, please do give it a like. Let's get into it. I'm going to share the screen for people watching in on YouTube, watching in on X. Remember, we're live on all of those video platforms. Let's get into it. Starting with some price action. We've got Bitcoin up a couple of percent at 69.1K, ETH at 3.8K, Solana up a percent at $166. Getting into the headlines, number one, this was from a couple of days ago. Biden vetoes the bill that would allow highly regulated firms to custody Bitcoin and crypto. A bunch of people kind of very disappointed by this turn from the president when it seemed to indicate that a bunch of people were maybe flipping more to be more pro crypto. We'll get into a little bit of a discussion on that in just a little bit. Number two, Chamath shares. Chamath, famous investor and business CEO, shared a 500K Bitcoin price target on the All In podcast over the weekend. They actually had a little crypto corner segment, which was very interesting to see. We're going to share some of the thoughts directly from them during the show, so we'll get to hear those and have our thoughts on it. And then finally, Roaring Kittie shares huge GME trade, 115.7 million shares and a 65.7 million call options expiring on June the 21st with a strike price of $20. Legendary is going to break that down a little bit. What's going on with this GME trade? What's going on with Roaring Kittie? Is this going to start another bull market set of behaviors? Getting into some more price action on the NFT side, we've got CryptoPunks down a few percent at 32.8 ETH, sliding towards 30 still. Bored Apes at 11.9 ETH, Mutants at 2.1, DGods at 1.2, Captains at 3.6. Azuki's down almost 8% at 3.9 ETH. Penguins steady-ish at 10.3, Mad Lads at 66 Solana, and the Nouns winning bid was at 4.8 ETH. A couple of notable sales. One of the main notable sales, I think, included in the snapshot is the Captain's Alien sale for 34.69 ETH. Captains are bucking the trend. Everything else is going down. Captains are edging up. We'll talk about that a little bit more in a moment. But Legendary, that is the price action. Those are the headlines. Anything that's catching your attention before we get into the bigger discussion today?
Yeah, absolutely. If we take a look at the Mintify heat map, I mean, one of the things you already had mentioned, Azuki's being down way more than the market, and for the first time in quite a while sliding under that 4 ETH floor price was surprising to see to me, and also to see like more Azuki FUD on the timeline again, where I don't know of any specific reason why we're seeing that FUD. That on the one hand, I don't know if you have any thoughts on the Azuki collection and specifics.
Yeah, let me come in there quickly before you go to the next one. Remember, I don't know how many days ago, obviously, because we do this every day and all the days blend into one sometimes. Remember we were talking about the Azuki price action the other day, and it was going up quite a lot. And then someone shared that there was like this collector score that people are taking note of. And they said like it was like double 2x collector points for the next 2 weeks or something. And so I don't know 100% the date, but I suspect we are either at the date when that 2x score maybe is no longer in existence, or we're approaching it and therefore people are kind of exiting their positions. That would be my uneducated, but that would be my kind of guess.
Counterpoint to that, though, would be, if I recall correctly, with the gachapon and the collector points, when you spin the gacha and collect your points, they are tied to the Azuki. So I don't think that you get to keep them once you sell the Azuki. So that wouldn't necessarily make sense to sell out of that position. But yeah, still could be the case once that event had concluded, to just move on.
Unless people are purely in it for the trade and not collecting the points, but know that other people are collecting the points, and therefore they would be happy to sell out because they don't care about the points.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. And the other quick NFT collection to touch on the Blast side of things, at Blastopians, Signal had called it multiple times that they're going to win the jackpot. Jackpot win finally happened with the Blastopians over the last couple of days. I think it was over the weekend. And obviously, ever since, the floor prices have been down a bit for the Blastopians, down almost 10% to 0.1 ETH, but honestly not that much of a dump, given the downwards trajectory that they already have been having ever since they had reached a peak at 0.4 ETH. So that was not as massive as I probably expected the dump to be.
Yeah, I'm just looking at this, showing it on the screen for the people who are watching in. Yeah, down to 0.1, down maybe 6 or 7%. But God, when you look at the NFTs on Blast, when you look at the heat map, the Mintify heat map for Blast all the time, it's just always like down 30%, down 30%, down, or like up 10%. It's just always huge numbers, which on some level, I would have thought is good for people, right? Because you have good volatility, which might be good for people. But yeah, always very volatile on the Blast side of things. That's interesting to see. Anything else catching, like moving away from specific price action, Legendary, anything else kind of catching your attention at the moment?
Probably from the Wolf game side of things, the announcement how they wanted to move forward with bridging the wolves, bridging the sheep, and the different ways to then earn gold, where there's going to be basically the classic mode with the Genesis assets of Cave Game, which means in the classic mode, you couldn't buy carrots and milk, the items that give you energy, which allow you to like explore and venture further and further into the cave. You basically have your energy and you might find some food. And if not, you need to just wait for your energy to replenish before you can continue exploring, which essentially means you can't just throw money at the cave and power through it and farm the most points. And you have to be a bit more strategic about that. and then they're also thinking about like a hybrid mode. So that kind of confirms the hypothesis that I put forward last show on Friday, where I was just hosting with Sammy, saying that I'm gonna pause my cave exploring in terms of not dumping new ETH at it until I can do it with Genesis assets, since they also seem to receive way more gold than the rest of the caves. And also interesting, and final note on that was that the gold distribution will be done on a per cave basis. So basically your individual performance per cave is being looked at, and not just the total amount of points that you collected. So if you farm multiple caves and you have one where like a top collector who got super lucky or was super early to it, that's going to be more profitable than just being average across multiple caves.
Okay, that's very, very detailed strategy for the people who are into it on Wolf Games. That's really helpful. We released our first Modern Market video last week, which was specifically on Wolf Game. We're going to cook up another one probably tomorrow on the blast side of things. It won't be to do with Wolf Game. It'll be to do something else, another blast opportunity that we like at the moment. So look forward to that. Interesting point of discussion before we hit the headlines, Legendary. I've been going through various tweets on crypto Twitter, as always, trying to find something that's catching my attention that I want to ask you about. Came across this one at the moment, which I guess is always a nice one to kind of refer back to. We've got Ansem tweeting that he has accepted that the most optimal trade is being giga long cults at the moment. So question for you is, what cults are you seeing at the moment? Which ones do you think that are forming, which are particularly strong? So maybe like a two-part question. One, like which are the hands down biggest cults that exist right now in crypto? Because sometimes they change and we don't always talk about this every week. So like where do you see them being at the moment? And then do you see any like new ones forming that you're kind of paying attention to?
Yeah, it's actually a very good question, because it reminds me of a post by Beanie that Beanie had put out a couple hours ago, linked it to you in our private chat, saying, what bothers me most about this cycle versus the last few is that it's just unfair. If you're not Cabal with access to asymmetric info, then you're playing against a stacked deck. I have no problem with gambling as long as the game isn't rigged, but these games are rigged by insiders. So he is basically confirming what Ansem is saying, just maybe being a bit more explicit about it. I think in terms of what cults we are seeing, maybe it's biased because I'm now obviously have grown as a content creator over the last cycle to this cycle, but I do think that there's a lot of deal flow, etc., being passed around between creators that it's just difficult to get access to if you're not inside this circle. That is one thing. In the more like cultish way of things, I would probably say that the meme coin meta, the meme coin narrative is very inviting to form cults around specific KOLs, around specific trading groups, and to just keep pumping up specific coins early. I'm not talking even about like the big memes that, you know, have perpetuated and keep existing, but just the like smaller circled pump and dumps that do continue to exist and carry on, and they probably have a very cult-like existence. And in a more cultural sense, you definitely have then the cults around specific meme coins forming and like pushing them forward. Could even go to the extent that, and I do mean that as a compliment, that Lamboland with Pac-Moon managed to create a cult, because my timeline is still full of people, and I do it myself, right? I'm also validating content, posting pack content, and have been doing that. You have people like 230 Havoc, who's an artist, who's basically managed to push himself to the top 10 or 20 of, I think it was the season 3 airdrop, with art that he created for Pac-Moon creators and also around like himself. So that's definitely a cult that has been forming there. But again, that I do mean as a compliment in a positive sense.
Yes, definite agree with the Pac-Man. What's it called again?
Pac-Moon. Pac-Man is the guy. I'm
okay.
Struggling with that for some reason as well.
Then I was thinking of the Beeple thing, calling everyone Pac-Moonians. Okay, I definitely agree with that example. I do want to come back and press you a little bit on some more examples specifically. But I just wanted to share a couple of thoughts on the back of that. Jack's got his hand raised. I definitely want to hear from him. Gogo's just joined. Want to hear from her in a moment too, on this conversation of like what cults do we see forming, which ones are the strongest right now. I wanted to share this tweet from Dees, which I'd actually had prepared as well in response to the Beanie point, kind of taking an opposite position, which I kind of lean towards this one actually. Disagree. You only need a few good plays per cycle to make it. The ordinal run from 0 to 1 was open to everyone. The Bohm run, remember that one, kicking off the pre-sale meta, went from 0 to a billion. That was open to completely everyone. Blast farming is more or less open to anyone if people see that as an opportunity. So his point was table selection and risk management are the two most important skills. So I know what you mean about the cabal side of things, particularly in terms of deal flow. I think that definitely exists. But when it comes to various opportunities that are out there at the moment, I think it's actually fairly meritocratic. Not on the private investment side. That's definitely gate kept to some degree. But there seems to be a bunch of things on the public market which are also available to everyone. So that's kind of where I'm thinking on that. When it comes to the actual cults themselves, and remember, we're just calling these cults kind of for fun. They're not literally cults. They kind of got some cultish behavior, and partly it's a positive thing, right? But I've spoken about ordinals and Casey as like this cultish kind of thing, which I definitely felt was developing for a while. And I think it served all of them very, very well, at least for a period of time. I think people who are into ordinals are like really, really committed to ordinals. I spoke to a bunch of ordinals people out in Dubai, so much so that I literally call them ordinals people because they literally gave me the impression that that was the area that they wanted to focus on more than anything else, and that's the area that they were most passionate about and most bullish on. So fair play to them. Respect them for forming around a thesis and kind of going at it in that respect. Legendary, want to come back to you just for a quick reflection on that. Maybe a few more specific examples if you have some, then want to work our way around the table.
Yeah, absolutely. I think both things can be true at the same time. I mean, agree, Blast is very meritocratic. I obviously have been farming it like a maniac for the last couple of months and will continue to do so. But with some of the other things, if you talk about a specific investment where you go in an early round and you have access to the info, whether it's a meme coin or project, and you have access to the info that basically that project has a very high chance of getting listed on Binance before everyone else does, you have an easier time to throw a shit ton of money at it. I mean, yes, BOEM was open for everyone. Ordinals run, not debating what Dees is saying there, but it's easier to go big if you have just more information than other people. That's a fact that I feel cannot be disputed. Sure. And at the same time, also Dees is right that there's definitely a lot of meritocratic opportunities out there that you can perceive without having the need to have any kind of access to insider info, like Blast. Like, I don't know more about Blast tokenomics, airdrop than anyone else on the timeline, but I do think that I'm picking quite good place on that, just by the amount of like time and brain work and capital they've been putting into it.
Yeah, I think that's very, very fair. Let's move around the discussion. Jack, welcome to the stage, my friend. What are your thoughts? We're talking about trying to assess cults at the moment. Are we long on them, short of them? Which ones are we thinking are emerging at the moment?
Yeah, I really like your ordinals analogy, B-Check, like the ordinals people for that reason, because I think it's just an extension of, the Bitcoin cult, realistically. And honestly, it's just, in my opinion, at least, or, actually from my experience, it's a movement against the traditional infrastructure that essentially has cost most of the working generations at this point, a ton in terms of having to pay for previous actors' mistakes. And, you look at 2008 financial crisis, you look, I'm not going to dig too deeply into all the issues, all the monetary printing that's happened, that's impacted us, inflation, going crazy right now. I think, honestly, ordinals is just an extension of that. It's people who are big on Bitcoin, are big on, big changes, like early adopters. I think the meme coin talk, I do think long-term ordinals has a lot more staying power for like more retail side of investors. I do agree with a lot of what's been said around the fact that there are these people who just have way too much information to say the market is acting in a fair way. I would attribute it to gambling in a certain case, but then some of these guys are playing the casino. Some of these guys are like basically, unless the whole market capitulates, are playing with like knowing what other cards are in other people's hands. And I think in the long term, that is not going to work for the majority as they start to learn this as it's going on, as it's happening. So yeah, that would be my take more generally, is I don't believe that people and we're not talking about the big ones. We're not talking about Mog, or I don't know how they were created, to be fair. You just don't know. But there is like a certain market cap, I think, where you basically at a point where you're safe. But when you're talking about new launches and people who are trying to trade in and out of these things and get the 1,000 DEXs, I think it's a rigged game. Like I've heard so much conversation. I've seen exposure to these sort of things, and yeah, it just doesn't at all play the same way that the ordinals and NFT space does. I think it's way more entertaining. It's got way more of a foundation in the long term than some of these early meme coins do. Bit of a hot take there.
Okay, fair enough. I think, yeah, look, I think definitely on these newer launch pads where there are bots set up and people know which ones to snipe, and when it gets past a certain price, they're like automatically snipe stuff and then sell. Like, I do agree that there's a degree of difference in skill / difference in knowledge in terms of the participants. Is that wildly different to a lot of other stuff? Maybe not, but at the same time, it definitely creates a difference in performance, most likely. Kind of want to refocus on just what types of things we're noticing. Like, are there any trends basically happening at the moment that we should be aware of in terms of this type of these groups forming or ideas forming that there's a bullish sentiment kind of supporting? Gogo, welcome to the stage, my friend. Nice to have you up with us for the first time. What are your thoughts on this conversation?
Hey, well, I was the only one that Beanie responded to because I have a complete opposite sentiment towards this. It's no more unfair than any of the previous cycles. This is just not a cycle that Beanie is particularly well exposed to or talented in. He made it big in the 2021 NFT cycle. He's not particularly talented in meme coins. It's not his flavor. And so he chooses like alt chains to back. So say Sui, and the only like altcoin that he's really backed is Thog. And anything else that's like really mimetic and popular,
he hasn't
he's
quite been
not
there for those, has he?
No, he doesn't play into the humor. And so he thinks everything is too niche for his taste, really, is how I've noticed him trade or stay away from trading. So according to him, that means it's unfair. Whereas he, in the past, had his own way of keeping scarcity and secrecy away from the rest of the trading audience. So it's very hypocritical of him to say that there's no more rigging in this cycle than any of the previous cycles that we've seen since the trading markets have been around. And I think that's a really bogus argument.
Okay.
So I think there was a lot more Kabbalistic behavior in the 2021 like NFT boom than there is now in like what we see in like meme coin, altcoin craze, because the cults just grow and grow and grow. So to pivot back to the cult-like behavior, the idea is to grow the community, not exclude the rest of the audience,
Sure.
right? So you share that information. Sure, the launch of the coin may be kept behind closed doors for like the first 30 minutes, but then that information gets shared at a viral pace. And if you want that coin to succeed, you try to work on it as a team. The coins that fail within a couple of hours, that's not a real community. That's not a real cult. And the cults that I see starting to turn up now and that I predict will become very powerful within the next few months are any that are relating to politics. Since we are in an election year, I am seeing several that pop up. They do fade away, but then like 10 new ones, like a hydra, will pop up that have to do with Trump, with Biden, and those stick around. So yes, we have 1 million cat coins and we have 1 million dog coins, and there are maybe 3 of each that have survived past like the 3-month threshold. But then look at Trump and Bowden.
Yeah.
Those have lasted a long time.
So, no, I completely agree. We're actually going to be touching more on politics now. We've been speaking about the political coins as their own kind of class of asset recently as well. So interesting to hear that that's one of the ones that you may be tipping for increased prominence as we go into the next few months, because I think that's something definitely to keep an eye on. Appreciate those takes. Go. Appreciate the take, Jack, as well. Tiro, we're going to have to keep it moving just for now. I know you've got an additional story to tell. I think you might be under the weather, so may not be able to contribute. So we want to get into this Bitcoin stuff, the main headlines for today. We've got the Roaring Kitty stuff still to come. We've got the Bitcoin news, and we have the Biden veto stuff. We're going to kick it off with this 500K Bitcoin prediction from Chamath. I've always said and been very public about my sincere enjoyment for the All In podcast. It's one of the main podcasts I watch every week. It's Chamath, Jason, Freeberg, and David Sachs. And Jason always gets a lot of shit from crypto Twitter, but I think he kind of enjoys it. But they basically had a dedicated crypto corner over the weekend. It's one of the biggest business podcasts now, and this has been clipped up by Altcoin Daily. I'm just going to share the few minutes. I have also figured out how to make sure the audio and video is playing for the people watching on YouTube. So we're just going to listen to this segment. Want to throw to Legendary and anyone else who has a thought on the thinking here, because I think what he managed to express in quite a short amount of time was a lot of people's thought about like how things could play out, how things should play out, but he kind of did it in a very succinct way with graphs and numbers, which oftentimes on crypto Twitter people cannot be bothered to do. So I'm going to share that now. We're just going to have a little listen, a little watch if you're watching in on YouTube or X. So we're going to do that in right now. Here we go. Let's get it going.
Look at the pattern of Bitcoin after a halving. So here's a little Bitcoin price analysis for you guys. So there's been a couple of halving cycles that have happened. And I asked him to go back and look at the price performance 1 month after a halving, 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, and 18 months after a halving. And what you notice is that there are these moments initially where essentially when you go through a Bitcoin halving, people are sort of reassessing what's happening and they're trying to figure it out. That's sort of what I would say happens in the first month and roughly what also happens in the first 3 months. But then within 6 months to a year and 18 months of these things, there are these crazy price appreciation cycles that happen. So that's what this page shows, which is, 18 months after the first halving, the Bitcoin price returned 45x After the second halving, it returned almost 28x. And after this third halving, it returned almost an 8x, which is really incredible returns in such a short period of time. If you go to the next page. And so if you graph that, this is what it starts to show, which is what is this price performance after each of these halving cycles. Now, why is that interesting? Well, it's interesting because on top of this halving, which theoretically, if history is a guide, we should see some price appreciation. Obviously, the other thing that's happened is we've commercialized Bitcoin. And we talked about this sort of as my big prediction for 2024, which is these ETFs are really going to allow Bitcoin to cross the chasm and have its sort of central key moment, right? And so if you apply the averages, and again, these are just averages, they're by no means predictions. Okay, so I just want to qualify that.
Yeah,
these are
this
just
is not financial advice.
It's not financial advice. These are just guesses.
Data.
We took these and we applied it to the price of Bitcoin. And if you go to the next page, you start to see what could happen if you just take the average of the last few cycles. So because the first cycle was so extreme, and you start to
so you're just doing cycle 2 and 3 here, to be clear.
Just the averages of cycle 2 and 3. And what you start to see is some really meaningful appreciation. And when I talked to Wences about this, how he explained it, which makes a lot of sense to me, is there are a lot of countries that will never look at Bitcoin credibly, even if they support it. The US may be one of those, but there's an increasing body of countries that will become dual currency. And they will look at their local currency, and then they will look at Bitcoin. And they will say both of these two things are needed. One, when you're transacting on a daily basis for random goods and services. And two, when you need to buy a permanent asset that needs to have residual value, you'll use something like BTC. And I think that's a very powerful concept. And if you look at what this price chart could indicate, is that if this thing starts to get to these levels of appreciation, it is going to completely replace gold and start to become something that has transactional utility for hard assets. And I think if you marry that with this worry that some folks have about dollar debasement, you start to see some really interesting opportunities.
Legendary. Interesting clip there. That's something I watched over the weekend and thought it was very, very interesting to hear them talk about it on probably the biggest, one of the biggest business podcasts in the world. What's your instinctive reaction? I don't want to guide you too much with a question here. Instinctive reactions. What are your thoughts on the kind of model that they applied to forecast some very, very significant Bitcoin price increases in the kind of coming months and years?
Yeah, a couple of thoughts on hearing that live for the first time. I very much like the caveat of saying, look, this is past performance. This is what would happen if the future plays out in a similar way, just going by the average of the last 2 cycles. What they really did like, however, content-wise, was the dual currency concept. Just saying there's going to be a bunch of countries, looking at countries like maybe Turkey, maybe Argentina, who are struggling with high rates of inflation. I'm adding that inflation part myself. For whom it might be very interesting to have a second currency or to have an alternative to dollar dependency. And if you look like at blockchains like Tron, we sometimes speak about Tron because
talk about Tron.
But then nobody really on the timeline speaks about Tron. But if you go to Argentina, you will see that a lot of the stablecoin transactions that people are doing there are actually being done on the Tron blockchain. And that's the use case of that thing, because it's fast and cheap. And people honestly who need that technical functionality to survive there don't give a fuck on what blockchain they're transacting. They just want it to be fast and cheap. So that dual currency need, I absolutely get. And I think that prediction that you will have behemoth countries like the USA, maybe like the European Union, if you look at it collectively, will strongly argue against Bitcoin. And the European Union did publish a paper on why Bitcoin is basically doomed to go to zero. That was when BTC hit the local bottom in the bear market, and ever since it pumped. They obviously like the existing system and like the amount of control that they can exert with the currency that they have, whether it's the dollar or the euro. But for other countries, they are on the other side. They are on the other end of that, right? If they want to have more stability, they are forced to either use dollars, to either use euro, and they don't want to have that external dependency. And they might see BTC as a very good alternative to that. Now, whether that means that we're going to see 500K BTC in the next 18 months or not, that's something I'm less sure about. But that dual currency future and whether it's going to play out exclusively on BTC or on ETH, talking about the city analogy for quite a long time, because of the infrastructure it's also being built and has been built for ETH for just a longer amount of time. Not that ETH is older than BTC, but just the man hours and dev hours that went into it are more significant by now. That I cannot predict, but generally the line of thought very much agree with.
Okay, that's interesting stuff. Appreciate your takes there. Want to hit the next two takes quickly because we want to get on to the next headlines. We've only got 15 minutes left of today's show. Funky, then Pancake. Funky first. Welcome to the stage, my friend. What's your take on the slides and the conversation that the boys at All In were having on the significant Bitcoin price appreciation?
Jim, everybody. I mean, I think Chamath has nailed Bitcoin for a long time. He's been a huge proponent going back for many, many years. The one thing I would take from what they just shared, and I concur with a lot of it, I don't think he necessarily means this cycle. You know,
Sure.
So he doesn't give a specific timeline for this. Can I see $500,000 Bitcoin by the end of the decade? Absolutely. But I just hate how the moon math quickly circulates. People start thinking, oh, it's going to go to 500,000. I'm going to hold on to my Bitcoin. Just be careful. Not financial advice and all.
I think that's a very, very fair point. Appreciate that. We have in the title 500K Bitcoin price target, but we have not said when. That is obviously an important aspect to it. Appreciate that. Funky Pancake, welcome to the stage, my friend. Nice to see you back with us. What are your thoughts on this kind of Bitcoin price target?
Hey, brother. Thanks for having me. Bitcoin price target, briefly. Yeah, 500K this cycle seems a little outrageous, but I agree. I don't think that he's necessarily speaking to this cycle. What I wanted to speak on is the Argentina comment, because I've spent the better part of 3 years here, and I think I've said that maybe even in the States before, but yeah, the majority of the population here uses USDT, USDC to do all of their transactions because of the inflation. And you know, stable coins are becoming the most important aspect of the blockchain, just because it's a way for people to hold value in their money without having to let's say involve the government in their holdings, and also keep large quantities of cash in their house, which is not exactly safe. So yeah, just from perspective, you know, I'm able to onboard and offboard legally, you know, crypto to cash and cash to crypto, sanctioned by the government here without any bank or government interference. And I think we're going to see a lot more of that in the future, as they see that helps their citizens become richer and put more money into the economy. But it's becoming a huge aspect to Argentina's economy right now.
Love it, man. Appreciate that additional context. I wasn't actually aware that you were over there at the moment, but as you say, having people with like that precise experience, and I think that's something which is so lost on people who are maybe part of an economy that is significantly more developed or has just been more stable in the last few years. They don't quite appreciate how important that stable coin is to some of those other more volatile nations. So appreciate that additional perspective, man. We've got a couple more headlines to get into today. One, and probably realistically, neither we have enough time to deal with in their entirety. So we're just going to do some relatively quick takes. Maybe we'll deal with the political one first, Legendary, because this kind of happened 2 days ago, probably after Friday's show. But we want to touch on it a bit. We will keep coming back to the political side of things over the next few months, because there's no way to ignore it, frankly. But after, so just if we roll back a few days, Trump was convicted a couple of days ago. And then after that, which I think is after the show on Friday, we had this news come out that Biden had vetoed the bill that would allow highly regulated financial firms to custody Bitcoin and crypto. Just in case people missed it, we had Chris Dixon, who is a very prominent managing partner at A16Z, said that we are incredibly disappointed but not surprised that the president has vetoed the repeal of SAB 121. 60 senators on both sides of the aisle saw how this could protect consumers in the digital asset market, and we were hopeful that the president would recognize that. It's more clear than ever we need to get more comprehensive crypto legislation passed into law this year. So there's more work to be done. Legendary, a quick take on this. before we kind of keep it moving, whether it's political, more practical in terms of the actual law? What are your thoughts?
I think it's a terrible decision to veto that. I think that clarity when it comes to accounting for cryptocurrencies, for BTC, would be super, super valuable for institutional players, for companies. And now vetoing that after positively signaling that this is actually a good idea seems to be a political play, but find it a horrible decision.
Fair enough. Funky, maybe a quick one from you, given that you are chief American political correspondent. Quick thoughts here in a kind of non-partisan way, if possible.
Yeah, just a quick thought. Well, I think it is somewhat partisan because it seemed like we had this shifting tide, but then I read, I don't remember exactly where, but somebody thinks that this is because of the Trump conviction, and after him getting all those guilties, that Biden probably felt a little more confident in vetoing the SAB 121. Again, that's speculative, but it seems like it was weird that there would be this shift when everybody was so positive for it.
Yeah, I spent, so maybe that was in the snapshot where you read it, Funky, because I shared this trader's opinion who I follow quite a lot. I mean, should you be following a person whose profile picture is a horse and their name is Horse? I don't know. I don't know if you should be taking political advice from them, but this is what I shared. He said, Biden admin thought Trump's crypto support was threatening, and his walking back of this and ultimately vetoing tells you a lot about how confident they are at a second term after Trump's conviction. Look, obviously the political landscape in the US is incredibly complex at the moment. We will keep coming back to it. I think on the show, on the All In show on Saturday when I was watching it, they spent a good 30 additional minutes kind of going through the ramifications of the Trump conviction, which we will not do here. But it's obviously complicated. There's various things to discuss and there will be implications. So we'll keep coming back to it as and when necessary. That day won't be today, but it's obviously on our radar. Right, let's hit the Web3 roundup to get you up to speed with everything else that's been happening in the last 24 to 48 hours. And then we'll hit the final headline. So from the Web3 roundup, which is in the snapshot, which is pinned up top, we have number one, Ethereum L2 Linea. This was pretty crazy. Shuts down chain after the Velocore exploit. They said, because other avenues of handling the exploit were closed, our team halted the sequencer to prevent additional funds bridging out. This was the last resort action to protect users on Linea. Obviously, this is one of the criticisms that a lot of ETH people will level at Solana because they can just shut it down and do this type of stuff. And, you know, it's one of the challenges, one of the realities of operating a chain with a lot of value on it. And when you do have the option to shut it down. So that's what they decided to do. Next, USDE by Athena is the fastest USD crypto asset to reach $3 billion in crypto history. We talk about Athena quite a lot as a kind of synthetic dollar. I'm definitely very interested in it. It's not no risk, but it is interesting. Good achievement for them there. Matter Labs withdraws the ZK trademark application. They had, for some reason, tried to trademark the two letters ZK in a space where everyone is talking about ZK stuff. They decided against that. Sounds like a wise decision. Next, Brett achieves a $1 billion market cap on Base. It's the first meme coin to do so on Base. That is interesting to see. And then a few more, all the bits of more news today is on celebs who are kind of flirting with / being in the space. Floyd Mayweather launches a token and then deletes the tweet almost instantaneously. Iggy's mother coin, after our interview with her last Wednesday, which seems like a long time ago, but was very enjoyable. So it's dipped around 20% to 0.06 after seeing highs of almost 0.09. And I think she's kind of working at it, to be fair to her. She instructed one of the top lawyers in the States to give her some legal advice. She seems to be going at it. Ghostface Killer also changes his PFP to a Bitcoin puppet, which is interesting to see. And one take from Daniel Got Hits, which kind of stuck with me in a way. It was like every single top signal from 2021 is back, but somehow it still feels like rock bottom. It does feel a little bit confusing from that respect. Legendary, before we hit the final headline, do you have a take on that? Like, people don't think we're kind of halfway through the cycle or just nowhere near the end. But you do have like a lot of celebrity kind of entrances and rugs and this type of thing. Quick take on that before we hit the final headline.
Yeah, I think meme coins this time are too big of a narrative to be end of cycle. That to me is different. Again, we have hit BTC all-time high a while ago, but didn't really capture media interest. Now a bit more media interest is coming via the meme coin narrative. So it is not surprising to see that celebrity interest also flowing in and coming into the space. But by no means do I think that this is the end of cycle top signal, because it's just another reason they're not here because ETH or BTC is at all-time high. They're here because people are printing millions and millions of meme coins.
Yeah, I think that's fair. One other thing that I would maybe add to the mix before you take over for the Roaring Kitty segment is that as each cycle happens, and then as each cycle and as crypto continues to prove itself as a staying power after each cycle, I think it's probably fair to say that people are more and more willing to enter earlier. So like, it doesn't necessarily have to be, this is again, like using recency bias as a way of using past performance to inform every take that you have in the future. It's like, oh, celebrities entered at the end of last cycle. Therefore, if they are entering now, that must mean we're at the end of the cycle. That might be true, but I don't know what cycle we were technically in last time in 2021, but that was one of many. And now we're in another one. And this is one extra that has shown crypto's legitimacy, shown that it exists, that you can operate properly here. And so I suspect that means we're one cycle beyond where people are more comfortable entering and not thinking that the whole thing is a scam, even if their plan is to scam. So who knows? That's just an additional thought. But I want to give you a few minutes here, Legendary, to close out the show. Roaring Kitty stuff is pretty crazy. People were kind of up in arms and truly shocked by the trade that he has on at the moment. Do you want to take people through what trade he has on, why it's significant, and why people are kind of losing their minds on it?
Yeah, absolutely. If you think you're a degenerate because you have a couple 100K or a million in a meme coin, that's nothing compared to the levels of degeneracy that Roaring Kitty has been sharing in his update on Reddit, where basically he had posted GME YOLO update June 2nd, 2024, and shared his position size. And that is an insane position size to have. So his total exposure towards the GME stock is 180 mil. He has 150 mil out of that is him holding the stock. And then he also has 65 mil in call options that will expire on June 21st with a strike price of $20 each. So maybe breaking down the call option part for those who are not familiar with it. Call option, there's 4 things we need to know about it. A call option gives the holder the right to buy a stock at a specified price, that is the strike price. Then you have the expiry date, that is in this case June 21st, until this option is valid. The strike price again is $20. And then there's obviously also a premium attached to it, which is basically the cost to purchase that option, because someone also needs to take the other side and take that risk. So essentially what Roaring Kitty has been doing here is saying he thinks that by June 21st, the GME stock will be significantly above $20, because he also needs to cover the $5 point something that he paid for his 65.7 mil option size. Sure. And there is a couple of ways how he can go about it. GME stock is currently trading at around $23. So he can either choose to sell the option before it expires, and depending on the option trading price, either realize a loss by doing so because the stock is not looking as bullish, or saying that at any time before June 21st, GME stock would pump to say $28, $29, and he could also sell the options at a significant gain, because those options would people then give the right to buy the stock at $20 and just realize the difference as profit. Or the other thing is for him to wait it out until June 21st and either being in the money because the GME stock has pumped above the strike price plus premium that he paid, and then realize the profit on that. Or if that's not the case and the stock dips below $20, he is out of the money and his options are all worthless.
Got it. Great summary of how these options work, specifically how, the mechanics of the call options. So thank you for sharing that for people who might be less familiar. What do you think of this take from Keyboard Monkey? I've just got a minute now, where he said, my good friend Roaring Kitty seems keen to speed run $0 here with this completely kamikaze position. GME just issued 45 million shares, atrocious earnings, has a fraction of the short interest of before. Shorts are much more prepared to manage risk. Oh, and all the lambs who followed his Twitter return were completely slaughtered last month. Should be a fun trade tomorrow nonetheless. This was written yesterday.
He's so contrarian.
Who, Keyboard Monkey or Roaring Kitty?
Yes.
Yeah,
No,
he does take the other
Monkey.
side of things quite a lot, and he's just very, very comfortable. But that's why I actually like always listening to him, because he's always coming up with something that's willing to just go against the timeline. And he absolutely does not care what people think in that respect. Legendary, a take on this?
Yeah, I think the point where I agree with Keyboard Monkey is there just seems to be an enormous bet size to take. Like, obviously, Roaring Kitty has made a shit ton of money, and probably if he did that with 20, 30, 40 mil, wouldn't matter too much if he lost that. But I do think that his like 200 mil position on that, even for him, is a significant amount of money, given that he's not coming from an ultra rich background and he's traded all the way up. And now to take that enormous risk with close to 200 million bet, that's the part that seems a bit insane to me.
To be fair, one of the just additional bits of context for people to know when they see these crazy numbers, it does seem, well, there's rumors that there's something else behind it, which is probably quite an important detail. When Ansem was sharing some of the information earlier today, Kobe replied and said, I think he raised a fund recently. So it could be those dollars. And Ansem asked, he raised a fund to go all in on GameStop. What? And Kobe kind of explained, if you think about it, it's kind of smart. You just need to raise 5 times your own intended buy size to profit the same, but with no risk, only reputational risk. And practically, actually, the reputational risk is 0 because you all in GameStop with other people's money after telling them that's exactly what you're going to do. So obviously that's the way the funds operate, right? Where the fund operators make money because they're also charging a management fee at the same time. So they don't actually need the trade to go as well as you do as the trader yourself. Just to like a double clarification then, that's just literally Kobe tweeting. And although we put him on a pedestal and take his information as like a very important source, I haven't seen that confirmed anywhere, but just wanted to put that out there that some people think, or Kobe thinks that he raised a fund recently. So maybe that is fund money and not all his own personal money on the trade.
Someone else I follow who analyzes these investments actually put out data that he's in for the mid 300 millions, actually, that is much larger than this.
Interesting. Maybe
I'll pin it up. I'll pin it up for you. Yeah.
Yeah, you can do. We're actually closing the space now, Go, because we're at time.
Oh, I'll just share it with you later.
Yeah, perfect. That'd be great. Then we can take a look and maybe discuss it tomorrow if necessary. But guys, I appreciate you very much. That is our show for today. As always, just a reminder, we do this every single day, Monday to Friday, 7 a.m. Eastern time, 12 p.m. BST, every day of the week. We discuss the NFT market, the crypto market, and these outrageous bets that are made on the internet, trying to figure out if people are going to win or not. I'm your host, B-Check. I'm joined by my legendary co-host. Legendary, thank you to our contributors, to Gogo, Funky, Jack, and Tiro up on stage. And thank you for joining us. We'll be back same time, same place tomorrow. Have a good one. See you then. Bye-bye.